Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Love the sunshine today, right? Feels like it's 10 o'clock at night, but it's a good afternoon. So welcome to the MTA Board meeting, and I will call this meeting to order. And first on the agenda are the approval of the November 18th, 2021 minutes. If I could have a motion for approval.
So moved. Janet Miller.
Second, Walt
So I
Cersei.
have a motion and a second. Any additions, deletions, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have minutes. Thank you very much. They are approved. And next on our agenda are the public comments. And for public comments, I have Mr. Bull, John Bull.
Good afternoon. Three items. Really appreciate the implementation and initiative by Wego with providing transportation for the cold weather response plan. That's essential. That's really good work. Second thing, I'm looking forward to what the NICE committee presents about the Better Bus service expansion and improvement and directions for the next phase expansion. I note there's some grants, the JARC and these acronyms, JARC and MCID, really obscure, but really important federal grants. And I noticed there's a local item about having real estate services to locate some properties for easements, leases, and so forth. And the last thing, I noticed some attention on quick ticket fare capping, which is really pertinent to the people who are bus riders. And happy holidays, y'all.
Happy holidays to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull, and happy holidays to you, and thank you for writing it on your note to us as well. Thank you very much. And my esteemed colleague next to me, Mr. Cersei, reminded me that I failed to do roll call. So it's good to have a community of colleagues sitting at a table with you, right? So I'm just so excited about that. So let me just do a roll call. Walter Cersei.
I'm here.
Gail Carr-Williams, present. Janet Miller.
Present.
Jessica Dolphin.
Present.
That is the roll call. Mary Griffin is not here today, and that was who was present at the time we took the vote for the approval of the meetings as well, so the record is clear. Okay, so speaking of you, Mr. Cersei, I'm gonna turn this agenda over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. We'll begin with the Operations and Finance Committee, of course. And we will hear the monthly financials from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ed Oliphant.
Thank you, sir. On pages 6 through 8, you have the financials through October, so the first third of the year is complete. I did put a short narrative in there for you to read, but just wanted to highlight a couple of things, mainly on the revenue side. You can see that we are, I'm on the right-hand side of page 7. You can see that we're still outperforming our budget, which is a good thing. Hopefully that will continue. We will see as we go through the year. The next line is contract revenues. Now, if you will note, back over on the left-hand side, it is now back up over $200,000 a month with our services that we provide to RTA down to Rutherford County. They did put their full complement of buses back in service, similar to what we did in October as well. But you will note that it is still a little shy of what the budget is, and that is mainly due to the, just like we did a restructuring with our express bus services, RTA also did some restructuring of their services as well. So we're going to be a little short for the year in terms of hours provided compared to the budget, but they do have their full complement of buses back out on the road. And the only other item I have is in terms of revenues, is the other transportation revenue. I have meetings scheduled with Premier in January to discuss coming back. As you will recall, they were very optimistic in trying to come back to full contract, and they're still lagging, as we've seen with every other business. And then the last item is on page 8, just for transparency, on the accounts receivable and payable aging at the bottom. RTA at this point currently owed MTA about $379,000 of that 1.1 million, and we owed them about 18,000. So unless there's questions, that concludes my report.
Ladies.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes. I must say ditto to that.
That important year-end pledge, right?
All right, next up, of course, is Mr. Andy Burke, our Chief Operating Officer, who will give us the monthly operating statistics.
All right, thank you very much. If you turn to pages 9 through 13, this is your operations dashboard for the month of October. I did provide a narrative as well to kind of give you a quick highlight of what that is. One thing to note is this is when we we have a change of service for October is when you can kind of see a lot of our service changes kind of going into effect. Some things to point out is our safety accidents kind of crept up on us this year. However, kind of comparing it year over year, we had less service running and therefore less congestion, traffic, and all that stuff. And then taking a peek compared to 2019, we're pretty in line with how things were there. I'll also say in our ridership, we are still creeping up. But again, I like to kind of take a look at where we were pre-COVID. We were doing about 63% of where we were October, same period. Mind you that there's still similar type of data where October had 21 weekdays this particular month, whereas in October 2019 there was 23 weekdays. So we're going to have a little bit more ridership, more revenue hours during those times. And then the other thing I'll kind of put light on is the miles between road calls. That continues to increase with efforts going in our mechanics and our maintenance areas. In the future months, we'll be coming back with our fleet audit to kind of show like the different areas that we've been improving on. And unless there's any questions, that'll conclude my report.
I mean, that's an extraordinary increase in terms of,
Well, again, from
miles.
2020 to 2021, significant mile difference and whatnot.
Sure.
So
Sure.
again,
Sure.
but we are seeing increases from even 2019 to 2021, so.
good point. Okay, Andy, is that it?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Carl Rokos, our maintenance director, is going to lead us through the discussion of batteries.
Madam Chair and members of the board, we use light duty and heavy duty batteries on everything we work on when a battery needs replaced. So in July, we went out to bid for bus batteries, and we received 3 responsive bids back. That was Jamison Transportation Products, ExoQuip, and Interstate Batteries of Middle Tennessee. These bids were evaluated in November, and Jamison Transportation Products, which is a male-owned minority business, was the lowest responsive bidder. Now, the DBE goal for this project was 2%. Jamison came in with a 60% DBE goal or percentage for participation. So that's very good. And the contract won't exceed $400,000 for the 5-year duration. So what I'm here to do is ask you for permission to let Steve, or the Chief Executive Officer, have authority to execute the bid contract. Yeah. What's that?
Well, write the check, doggone. So any questions of Mr. Rokos? Well, here.
No trouble getting the batteries?
At this time, no. I mean, I can't predict the future, nor can anybody else, but supply chain issues may pop up, but they guarantee they can deliver, but we'll see.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to recommend to the board that we approve the the recommendation of the maintenance department, the maintenance chief, and empower our CEO to engage the Jameson Group for batteries, light and heavy.
Very good.
That's awesome. That being a recommendation, there's a recommendation from the committee. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have lightweight and heavy-duty batteries. And there's music to be sung about that. But the motion carries.
All right. As everybody watches me try to turn off my doggone telephone.
You did great.
I'm gonna ask our Chief Administrative Officer to lead us through the upcoming procurement projects list one more time.
One more time, thank you so much. Again, you can see the projects that are listed on pages 15 and 16 of your packet. I would drive your attention to a few new ones that you may not have noticed last time, but our compensation study, our RFP for employee assistance program services, and real estate services. I believe that's something that this board will be hearing more information about just in general. But again, if you know of people that you might refer to us, that'd be fantastic. And I would just like to take this time to really give a kudos to our entire procurement department, and particularly Amber Gooding, Rachel Johnson, for their fantastic effort in putting on a contractors outreach event. It was attended by over 50 people, a great opportunity to connect prime contractors and subcontractors, and just again, another fantastic way to get the word out to contractors that, hey, we are someone you want to do business with, and we want to do business with you.
Awesome. Congratulations, everyone.
Yes, indeed. Be sure and I've got about a dozen references for Rita. So I challenge y'all to come up with one or two. Yes. That concludes the work of the Operations and Finance Committee, Madam Chairperson. I return the gavel to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Searcy. And with that, I will pass it along to Ms. Miller.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So on the NICE committee agenda, we have one action item and a few discussions. And so we're going to kick off with the North Nashville Transit Center Community Engagement and Cultural Design Elements Overview. And we're excited. We've got Hunter and his team and Perry here to join us. So I will hand it over to you, Miss Rita and Trey, to kick us off.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to provide introductions for us this afternoon and toss it over to Rita and Kristen from our design team. So in July, we updated the board on the progress of the design for our North Nashville Transit Center. If you recall, at that time, the largest focus of our meeting there was talking about operational considerations. How do we take this piece of property and make it a functioning site for bus operations? And during that meeting, we noted that with the design that we were considering, there's a lot of space on the site that can be utilized by the community that does not necessarily involve getting on or getting off of a bus. We're basically operating on the perimeter of the site that we've proposed. So we spent the last several months with the DeGar Communications team and the Smith G team, surveying the community and talking to them and having an advisory committee, which Rita will go through the details of our community engagement efforts, to start to fill in the rest of that puzzle piece, right? So we've got the perimeter kind of set on what works for bus operations, and now we're looking at filling it in with concepts that reflect the community and seek to have that buy-in in the neighborhoods in which we place these transit centers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rita, who will overview our community engagement efforts, and then Kristen, who will walk through the design concepts.
So what you're about to see from Christian and the whole Smith G team is really a culmination of all the efforts that we've made, and really since about 2019. During that time when this was just an idea, our CEO, Steve Bland, Eric Beyer, Amber Gooding, and I started, after talking to this board about the project, going out to the community, business leaders specifically, our elected officials, just to be sure that, they understood what we were trying to accomplish, what was possible, and that they, in fact, were excited about it. Then we moved into some more formal type in community engagement, and with big help from Dugard Communications, we had a kickoff. I know Mr. Searcy was there. That was a little smaller scale than we had originally anticipated when this project was first dreamed up because of COVID, but we had a good turnout there where we were able to sort of kick off, talk to the community about the project, what was going to happen on the site. And then from there, we really had to get creative, again, because COVID had not completely stopped or gone away. But then we said, hey, let's make sure we're also sending out some surveys. We had some opportunities online, but we wanted to make sure we got pieces of paper in people's hands. So we literally sent out mailings to residents within a 1 mile radius of the actual transit center. And we got about 400 responses back through that effort, as well as having our staff actually ride the bus or buses that went along that route and handing people surveys right on the spot. In addition, when we saw some decrease, thankfully, in COVID cases, there were some elected officials and community leaders who felt more comfortable having some in-person meetings. So we were able to have those as well with both Councilman Taylor, Councilmember Toombs' support, as well as Ruby Baker and her neighborhood association. Again, just a great opportunity to get some direct feedback and put surveys in hand. Okay? So as we got those back, and I know you have it in your packet, it's also on the screen, it just gives you an idea of not only the completed surveys, but who was completing those. It was really important. We heard time and time again when we first started having conversations about this project, and as we were going out into the community, make sure you hear from the residents who are there now. Okay? We appreciate thinking of the future resident, but please don't overlook those of us who are there right now and those of us who are actually in the area. So on this slide, you can again just kind of see the breakdown for people actually in Nashville, in North Nashville, who responded to the survey. And in those surveys, we were able to get some feedback just on particular things that they would like to see at the transit center. As Trey alluded to, and we all know, we are in the business of getting people from point A to point B, and so there are some things that we have to have for this to be a functional transit center. But then we'll talk about, as Christian goes through her slides, but what can it look like to make sure people know when you get there, you are in the North Nashville Neighborhood Transit Center. And so with that, I will go ahead and kick it over to Kristen.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for having us today and for listening. Perfect timing. Do you want me to do? You good? All right, so like Rita had mentioned, we went through a lot of meetings with the community, whether that was in person or virtual, and the overarching theme that we really heard from the community was this concept of voices. Having people's voices from the past be recognized, voices of the present being heard, and voices of the future. How do we provide that space for voices of the future? So this was really the overarching theme and concept for our design. And we really wanted to, like Rita said, make this very unique to North Nashville. And how can we do that? So voices of the past, touching on that. Voices of the past, how do we recognize all of the voices of the past? Because there have been so many that were thrown out. And I think the really big main concept that stood out was the Freedom Riders. The Freedom Riders movement, it's very much home to North Nashville. And being that this is a transit center, it felt very much unique to this site and really applicable to the site. And so we were really challenged on how do we creatively influence and adapt it into the site itself. And there was someone at one of the community engagement meetings that mentioned how can, when you come here, recognize this is a bus transfer station. And so we thought, could we put the Freedom Riders bus in plan integrate it into the actual paving of the site, and then recognize each person that was on this Freedom Rider bus from Nashville at their seat position within the bus. It's something that could be very playful with the community. As kids are here on the site, it's at it's centrally located, and kids can, kind of sit in the seats and be able to experience that real time while they're at the transit center. Another concept that came out of a little bit of history and our own exploration was, how can we recognize the Freedom Riders movement as a whole along the central spine of the site? And so you can see here in this image, there's some bands of color that we really thought would be an interesting way to highlight the different stops that the Freedom Riders took and how Nashville was the central spot that we joined them in Birmingham. And so throughout the whole site, we do plan on being able to recognize all those stops from Virginia all the way, even though we didn't make it to New Orleans, each stop as a color band that's integrated into the site. We felt like at certain points, having pylons for information for people that are coming and going throughout the site to be able to understand the history of what the Freedom Riders were at those pylons would be really helpful to understand what this historic movement was. But obviously this is something we would still need input and help with from more of a historian locally. So that's really honoring the voices of the past and the design concept for that one area of focus. And so next we'll be focusing on voices of the present. And for voices of the present, there was an idea of buy a brick was thrown out quite often, but for us, we felt like, how could we integrate that more into the architecture so that it's a long-lasting, artful curation point of the building itself? And so locating where that could happen, we really felt like the corner facing Clarksville Pike is very visible. It's adjacent to the inbound station. And we felt like we could work with an artist that could also help us arrange, whether it be names or a quote, or even just a painting of a tile, and integrate it into the building itself so that it's more permanent and more artfully curated. So that was really voices of the present and allowing people here presently in the neighborhood and the community to be integrated into the architecture. And so lastly, we arrive at voices of the future. And I think one element that was really voted on the most throughout our community advisory group meetings was an amphitheater. And there was the story of, how do we allow people in basically the younger generation or the current generation, just giving them and providing them a space for their voice to be heard, whether that's through music or through spoken word, or just through coming and speaking, whatever you feel like that day, but providing a space for that to happen and not having it be static, but having it be more of a dynamic space. So you can see we've integrated seating into it. It will also be a point in the plaza space that's integrated into the paratransit drop-off as well. So we do see this as a very multifunctional spot central to the site, integrated with voices of the past and leading into voices of the present, and then providing this opportunity for voices of the future. So these were really the concepts of integrating into the site and the architecture itself. But we also heard here on the last slide some other elements that we didn't want to be forgotten. So a PA system, Wi-Fi, some vendor opportunities and infrastructure. And I cannot read the last one from this far away, but these are all elements that we know that we will be providing. And the other elements that we touched on of voices of the past, present, and future are how we can integrate more into the site and the landscape. So Rita, I think I'm going to kick it back over to you.
So lastly, you've heard mention of, both from Trey and Christian, this advisory committee. There was a group of about 14 people who volunteered to participate in this committee to look at all the information we gathered from the community, having our design team there. And again, so much thanks to Dugard Communications. I know Perry Dugard was here. I don't know if she still is. Great. And Van Pinnock, who were just fantastic in helping us moderate and really keep the group focused on the things that the community had said, these are important to us. Now tell us how you put that into a visual, if you will. But the other thing that came out of this advisory committee that was really along the same path as what we heard throughout the community was naming the center. And I know that's something that this board has even thought about. And there were names that consistently came up. Elizabeth Duff, who many of you know was our first female African-American bus operator. And there's a small bio about her there. Another name that came up was Rip Patton. And some of you may be familiar with him. He was a freedom rider, a TSU graduate student, just very, very active in the North Nashville community, and that's where he was from, quite honestly. And then another name was Nobel Virgil Blackwell. Some of you may not know him, and I know Gail has a little bit of an upper hand because since she was so wonderful in helping us with the advisory committee, she got a sneak preview of this presentation. But Mr. Blackwell was a gentleman here locally who, if any of you are from my generation and familiar with Soul Train, he was the precursor to Soul Train. It was really responsible for highlighting R&B acts here actually in the city and particularly in North Nashville. A couple of other names that were also brought out in our discussions with the advisory committee were Senator Avon Williams, again, an attorney, a prominent civil rights advocate here in Nashville. As someone that we might consider, as well as Mrs. C.E. Magruder, who is also a very well-known civil rights activist here in the city. And interestingly enough, the Magruder Center, her namesake, is actually a stone's throw from our transit center site. I will tell you that from the advisory committee standpoint, all of them did rally around, if this board agrees, to propose to council to name the center something. They all seem to be in favor of Rip Patton, again, because he's from that area, what he did, the connection to the Freedom Riders. But there were also, with these other names, there were suggestions about finding ways to incorporate them into the center. You know, looking at Mr. Blackwell, there were ideas about if we have this amphitheater, maybe there's a way to tie music into that. If we also looked, obviously, at Miss Elizabeth Duff, somewhere inside the transit facility honoring her. I'm sure I don't have to tell this board, and Margaret will jump in if need be, but naming is a process. It's not just that this board gets to decide, but certainly you would be able to recommend to council and provide information to council for them to consider a name for the facility.
Okay, why don't we?
I think Walter had a question.
Walter.
Is there a motion in order?
Why don't we have a discussion first? Let's see if we have questions. Y'all want to do that? Just because it was a lot of information. It's really great stuff. I guess my first question is, what would you like from the board? Are you looking for feedback? What's the most helpful here? And I think the naming is something that we need to be really thoughtful about, right?
Absolutely.
And the community voice is what really matters here. So are there any questions? So for instance, I have a question about the amphitheater. I think it's a wonderful idea. I love it. You got to have programming that comes along with these public spaces, or they can end up being empty, not great things. So has there been thought about how you program that so that it doesn't just become a concept there? So I'm seeing lots of nodding heads, which is a good
Absolutely,
thing,
yeah.
right?
I'll jump in. Rita and I, we've talked through this.
Yikes. Is that me?
Rita and I have talked through this process about just what you mentioned is it's nice to provide the space, but you also need to activate it and have that. And we showed up there. One of the things that came through a lot was having vendors on site and coordinating food trucks through the pickup drop-off area that we have, and having that space where people that are there can activate and utilize the space. And through our talks is ultimately be looking to utilize our internal team to provide a programming calendar for the facility, setting up facility, coordinating with nonprofits, as we've heard from the Magruder Center, looking to do any sort of activities on site and dedicating staff resources to that programming over the site.
Good. You just want to be sure that you have resource dedicated to it, so
right.
I think that's
Well, I
great.
think a big part of the focus too will be forming partnerships with other groups that can, I mean, we're not, as I said to the group, we're sort of the bus people. We're not necessarily the dance people or the art
Steve's going to get out
people.
there and sing. That'll be a
That's-
huge hit, I'm
That's one
sure.
sure way to deactivate the site. But definitely, and that came through loud and clear from the group, is that, you know, plenty of partners that we can work with to develop that type of thing. And what I would add to it is, we're not really asking for a specific action from the board at this point. We wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to see it. I think generally speaking, Kristen and Rita would agree that the advisory group, and Gail, I would really appreciate your comments. We're supportive of the general design concepts. Our intent is to, after the holidays, go back out to the public to show these so that you're not caught
Good.
surprised. And as I've kind of email exchanged with you and off the conversation Gail and I had, that maybe we have a whole bunch of issues prior to getting the finalizing construction documents to kind of walk through and make sure everybody's comfortable with, so that maybe we do kind of a lengthier workshop format activity in January with the board to kind of set a direction, you know, on these things before
Okay,
we.
I just didn't want to us get ahead of ourselves. Questions? Walter, do you have a question or?
No, I'm ready to make a recommendation.
Well, if I can just, if I could just add a few more things. Steve and I did talk about in January, if we could come together and devote a dedicated time to this, maybe an hour before our board meeting, and we can talk, we can see exactly where we are. Hopefully we can go near the site to be able to sort of see where we are, get the visual, and then at that point, really understand what all of it looks like and sort of take it all in and be prepared to sort of move from some items at that time, if that's right, Rita. But I can say personally, having had the opportunity to be a part of this process and this design process, that one of the beauties of it was the engagement of the community. And I think when we engage in meaningful, intentional ways, we come out with something that is really meaningful for the community, that it is part of what they do. So Perry and Van, thank you for all your work. And Hunter, thank you. I think everybody has grown tremendously. And I think as a result of this collaboration, that we all know something more about a community that we did not know before. And I think it makes us all better. Not only does it make our community better, but it makes us better. It makes us more responsive at MTA, and it makes us more responsive as citizens to understand each community's culture and each community's history and how we go about designing transit around that, and that is critically important. So Rita, thank you for inviting me. Steve, thank you for inviting me to be a part of that process, because I too learned an awful lot and I gained so much, both as a board member and personally. So thank you for that gift.
Any other comments? And then Walter, we'll throw it down to you. I would say I love personally the idea of honoring all of these people, right? I mean, as much life as we can put in here and learnings. I mean, why wouldn't we, right? So I love that idea of don't make it a or, make it an and. So that's just because they're all amazing. I mean, golly, they're amazing. So.
It was a lot of discussions in these groups about where the name, which part of the facility should be named, which part. And once we can see the design a little better, that gives you even more clarity about the naming and how many names to bring in and how we place the names. Also the visual about where it's placed in terms of design. So that's important.
I would feel better after walking the site and seeing it, because this is all pretty new, right? So, Walter, what'd you have on your mind?
Well, the only thing I would add, and is the reason for my readiness to make a recommendation, there's only one person on the list who addresses all of our interests: neighborhood, civil rights, transportation, and is also known not just in North Nashville, but around the city. I can endorse the idea of naming individual spots in the transit center for other individuals. There's only one name that really stands out for me, and that's why I'm ready.
Do you want to tell us who that is?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Rip Patton.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great. So do we want to, kind of ruminate on, kind of sit on this and think it over, go walk the site, have deeper discussion next month? Will you be happy with that, Walter, if we?
Yeah, just remember, I lived in North Nashville.
Oh, no.
So, all right.
Absolutely, Walter.
I want deference.
Yeah,
And given the schedule for finishing out the design documents and construction bidding, it's not something that you have to decide this month
Okay.
or even next month. So you do have time to, as you say, Janet, ruminate if you'd like.
okay, great. Other comments?
Walter, I will say that sentiment was loud and clear, yours as well as so many others. And the richness of Rip Patton lives in all of us, and he was incredible, and he could sing, so if he was at that amphitheater, so we don't let Steve sing, he could at least, we could let Steve lead the soul train line, if he don't want to sing, right?
Good.
I can see him now, right?
Man, that'll be a sight, won't it? Other comments, questions? Jessica, anything?
Yeah, for my part, I'll just say, great work. I love that these ideas came and were generated from the actual community. The transit center will be going in, and particularly of interest is the use of Freedom Riders, which is a major civil rights movement that happened on transit and buses, which I think really is a great tie-in to how transit can influence our shared experience. So kudos to the team on that.
Yep.
Well, great. Well, this is a lot. Great work. Beautiful
Yes.
design work, Hunter. You guys always do an amazing job. So let's continue to learn. And then again, we are going to take a deep dive into this, probably with an extra added hour in January is what we're talking about. So, yeah. So Walter, bring your enthusiasm back in January and we'll bring this thing home. So I don't know. It looks like it's rising right now. So yeah. Okay. Great discussion. Thank you again, everybody, for that. We'll move on to our monthly fare capping approval, and Hannah Schaefer, who's a transit planner with us, is going to talk to us about that. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So following the in-motion strategy to make service easier to use, Wego staff has been working over the last couple of years towards a full launch of the quick ticket e-fare payment system. So the most recent adoption was in February 2020 of the account-based system, and along with that were mitigation strategies to reduce any potential barriers to entry of the system, particularly for low-income and minority customers. So part of that strategy was to implement daily fare capping, or also known as best value, which offers riders the benefit of a day pass without the need to convert a dollar amount to that day pass. So since then, we've continued to pursue additional strategies to reduce any potential burdens that were discovered during the equity analysis, as well as the public outreach of the new payment system. And that brings us to today's recommendation to extend that fare capping on a monthly basis. So this provides additional benefits and in a more meaningful way for riders. So with monthly fare capping, when a single card holder pays for individual trips in a single month that equal the value of a month pass, all other trips that month are free for that card holder. So with any changes to a fare policy, we do have to complete an equity analysis to determine if there are any potential adverse effects to low-income and minority populations. And after completing the equity analysis for this policy, we discovered no such effects, and in fact, this actually brings new cost savings to our riders who may have been out of reach otherwise. So to that point, we recommend that the adoption of the monthly fare capping be approved by the board today. So additional information is available on page 18 of the board packet, but otherwise I can take any additional questions that you may have. So
Sounds like I was reading it ahead of time and I'm like, who wouldn't want this, right? So, questions, comments? I think it's a great idea. If there's no questions or comments, then the NICE committee will recommend to the full board of directors the adoption of the monthly fare capping, and that will take effect on January 1st, 2022. So,
Well, thank you, Janet. That is a recommendation of the committee, not requiring a second. Is there any further discussion, any further comments? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. We have monthly fare capping approval. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.
okay, thank you. Good job. Well presented. All right, next up, Dan and Felix are going to talk to us about our Wego Link program review. And this will be interesting to get an update on this. So I will hand it over to you, Mr. Dan.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon. And I am providing an update on our Wego Link pilot program that provides first and last mile connections to the Route 55 Murfreesboro Pike in the Antioch area of Southeast Davidson County. And we do have some slides in your packet and behind you here. So service is being provided through a partnership with Uber, as well as trips being provided by Mobility Solutions, which is one of our third-party paratransit contractors. And they're providing trips to those who don't have access to smartphones or credit cards, as well as customers that require a wheelchair accessible vehicle for their trips. As long as the rider's trip is within the zone shown on the map and starts or ends at one of two designated transfer locations, then the rider receives a discount automatically with Wego covering a portion of their trip. So following beta testing over the summer, the program fully launched in October in coordination with our fall service changes. And the customer fare for the trip for most trips is right around $2, which is the same as it is on our fixed route service. And the trips can be a little bit more if there's surge pricing or that kind of thing in effect, or if a customer is taking a particularly long trip. The subsidy or the cost to Wego as the agency is actually fairly comparable to what our pre-pandemic subsidy per trip was on fixed route service as a whole, and is actually quite a bit less than that for what would be relatively lower productivity routes where we might be looking at this type of service. So for example, the previously operating Route 73 Bell Road connector in a similar area, not the exact same area, the subsidy per trip there was about $35 per trip. I do want to note that the program as a whole is off to a slow but steady start. We've had, as of about a week and a half ago, just over 70 rides taken, but we were expecting that, especially with the pandemic, and that's actually, what we'd like to see in terms of ramping up this type of a service. And we haven't done any kind of aggressive marketing to this point, but we are looking at additional ways to get the word out about the program now that we're confident that everything's working the way it should and we've got a solid foundation to build on. Now, in selecting Antioch and also looking at future potential service zones, there's a few different things that we look at in terms of characteristics. Most important being that we have a suitable connection to relatively frequent or high capacity transit service. For example, in this case, the Route 55, which is running every 10 minutes. And so it's a relatively easy connection for people to make. We also need a suitable location for that connection to take place, preferably a sheltered stop that's accessible for pedestrians and also users of wheelchairs and other mobility devices. And we also don't want to necessarily compete with ourselves, so we're looking at areas where we don't already have a lot of fixed route service. And finally, we're looking at making sure that we're promoting both demographic and geographic service equity. We want to make sure we're covering areas where there are individuals that maybe are lower income, minority, single and zero car households. But we also want to generally expand the reach of our service network overall in the city. This slide indicates some conceptual zones that were highlighted in Better Bus, building upon some of those service selection criteria. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
So it looks like it's something Monica needs to tell us.
Yep.
Me? there seems to be something going on out in the lobby, and we will have to exit, and officer will give us directions as to what we need to do. We have any more action items, Steve? What do we have? Ladies and, can I end the meeting, Margaret? Ladies and gentlemen, in light of the fact that all we have left are informational items, I am going to move to adjourn the meeting at this time. Everybody, board members, you good with that? We are adjourned. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everybody. Let's all go out and do whatever they tell us to do and be safe right now.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.